Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Nesler. Episode coming to you a little bit late this week. I apologize if the intro audio is not up to snuff. We are recording this from an undisclosed location near an ocean. We got a great guest today, Jimmy Button. I promise the audio is full on what you would expect as we recorded that a few weeks ago. Jimmy Button and I had a great conversation about what he looks for in an athlete when representing a brand, or how does the internet play a role and social media play a role in rider slash brand expectations, right? So how has that changed working with riders like Nate Adams back in the X Games heyday to now, when obviously social media really wasn't as prevalent back when Nate first hit big and Jimmy was his agent. Big change to today. So we talk about that. How has the internet really changed, and how does he navigate those waters? I think you'll enjoy today's conversation. Hey, something that we enjoy at the Impakt Results office, we love coffee, and we want to make sure we get the ratio right. And our friends at Evil Coffee have told us about something called the golden ratio. It's 1 to 2 tablespoons of ground coffee for every 6 ounces of water. You can modify that if you'd like, but that's what they have deemed the golden ratio. So a ritual at the office is 2.5 ounces of coffee in the coffee maker. And man, I tell you what, we go through a lot of coffee, and we rely on our friends at Evil Coffee to keep us fueled up. Also want to give our friends a shout out at FMF. They want to keep you guys looking sharp and hook you up with a deal on all of FMF apparel. Use code MMP30 upon checkout to save 30% on your FMF apparel. Again, that's letter MMP30 upon checkout. It'll keep you looking dialed. And also go to the motobrand.com to check out the latest t-shirt collection drops. If you're a cycling enthusiast, a moto enthusiast, the 2020 pandemic, so much was taken from so many of us from the sports that we love, right? Waking up on a Saturday, not having racing to watch. And for a lot of you guys, depending on where you're at, not even be able to go to your local trail or your track. So Moto Brand was created to identify us as a collective of individuals that live to ride and ride to live. And there's some great shirts over there, some serious ones, some satire ones. We've got some for the ladies. Be sure to go to themotobrand.com and check it out. All right, that's enough for me. I'm going to go back to vacationing, and I hope you guys really enjoy this awesome episode with Jimmy Button. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Moto Marketing Podcast, presented by RacerX, the podcast for moto industry professionals, entrepreneurs, and riders. If you want to grow your brand and business in today's digital-first world, you have to know how to turn a stranger into a fan, turn a like into a customer. You have to know how to turn attention into dollars. This podcast is dedicated to keeping you in the know on real marketing tactics that work in the moto world so that you grow your business and help grow the sport. Get ready to learn from the very same marketing experts trusted by RacerX, Lucas Oil Pro Motocross, GNCC, and NBC Sports. They'll help you navigate the world of digital marketing for your moto brand. This is the Moto Marketing Podcast. Presented by RacerX.
All right, as promised, we've got an absolute legend on the line with us today, somebody that I'm excited for you to hear from, and a little bit of a different interview than maybe he's done in the past. We've got Jimmy Button on the line with us today to talk about what he's doing with the athletes that he works with, and what that kind of the athlete sponsor relationship looks like in the 2020 world that we live in. So, Jimmy, man, I really appreciate you jumping on the line today, and looking forward to diving into this with you.
Yeah, man, happy to be here and appreciate the time, and yeah, looking forward to having some fun with this, and I don't know, maybe throw a little education out there, or maybe just kind of pulling the pulling the veil off of it a little bit so people can kind of understand what's going on these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so the connection between us was made with Nate Adams, and we kind of dove into his conversation as far as what does your relationship look like with your sponsors? What are some things they care about now versus when, X Games was at its peak and social media really wasn't a thing at all? What does that look like now? And your name kept coming up. So when we got off the phone, I was like, hey, do you think Jimmy would want to jump on and talk about that? And that's definitely, I want to hear your input on how that has changed over the years. But I always like to take a step back quickly and just kind of, let people know how you got to where you're currently at right now. Obviously, we don't need to go back into your career. Everybody that listens to this show knows exactly who you are. You had a very unfortunate accident, which kind of moved you into your next phase of life. So you're the VP of Action Sports and Olympics at Wasserman. Where did that start? How did you decide that, hey, I think I want to take this role on working with athletes, and how did that come to be at Wasserman?
Yeah, I mean, it's I'll have to dive back a little bit. So after I was hurt, I got to a point where it's like, okay, well, I'm able-bodied enough now. I gotta do something, right? Because I made good money racing, but I hadn't made the kind of money. I was starting to make the kind of money that I needed to do to be good for the rest of my life, but wasn't quite there yet. And I had to spend a lot of money to get better with rehab and stuff. So I was at a point where I needed to get a job. And so, what's the first thing the old racer does, right? I called a bunch of my old sponsors, and I ended up doing a deal with Bell Helmet. I'd worn Bell for the vast majority of my career. And so they had just had the guy that ran their marketing department had left. And they said, hey, do you want to try to do this? And I said, okay, well, what is it? They told me what it was. I'm like, yeah, what the hell? I'll give it a shot. And so I did that. And I would say, unfortunately, within about 6 months of doing it, I found myself really, really bored. I'd had a lot of work in the first few months of getting everything kind of up and running. And then once I had it up and running, there wasn't that massive pull on me every day to do a bunch of stuff. And so I got a little bit bored, and it's not really complacent, just bored, I would say. And so I was like, okay, well, I need to figure something else out. And I was approached by a friend of mine and said, hey, I'm thinking about starting a company where I could help do some stuff in action sports, this, that, and the other thing. And so I said, okay, well, why don't we just put our heads together? We'll start this little management business. Obviously, I know everybody in motorsport. And so we started this little company called Action Sports Management. And we represented motorsports guys, all the guys I went and signed, like Nate Adams or Ernesto Fonseca or a number of different guys that I had signed. And then we had this, this other little part of it that was doing a couple snowboarders and skateboarders. And so that was, it was pretty interesting. I started going to races and signing guys to manage their careers. And to be totally transparent, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I've been a racer all my life, but the good thing about my career is that, I'd had to put together my own team when I came home from Europe. When I went to Europe, I had to handle everything by myself because I was there by myself. This was pre-internet days and really pre-everybody having a cell phone days as well. So, I was kind of there on my own, and you really kind of grow up and you learn, and you're not a handset everything. So I think I was pretty good with managing people and relationships and kind of understanding that you got to get on it and do it yourself to make it work. So I felt like I had that in me, and obviously I had the relationships. So, we started this company, we got going, and kind of miraculously, I would say, I hit a couple of really big home runs, good timing, fortunate, a little bit by accident, whatever it was. I was in the right place at the right time on a couple of things. And kind of got our name on the list, and kind of, who are these guys? What are they doing? That type of thing. Fast forward to a couple of years from there, and the opportunity comes up to partner with Stafford, who ran the family, and Casey Washington, who owned Washington Sports, to do a three-way partnership in late 2003 to build this big action sports company. And when we did the partnership, I mean, it was in October of 2003. I mean, I think all in with all three the companies put together, I think we had 27 employees total.
Wow.
That was it.
Yeah.
And now fast forward to today, we have 1,200 employees, in 16 offices around the world. We represent 2,500 athletes globally. So, I mean, the business is obviously, it's much different than it is today than it was then. But the thing that remains the same is I'm still just involved in motorsports.
Right.
It's what I know. Obviously, I dip my toe into some other things occasionally when time is right to fit it there or not. But for the most part, I stay in my lane. I know what I like. I know what I'm good at. I know the relationships I have. And so that's kind of how all this thing really came to be, and the thing that I started doing, when I got into the business is I went to the guys that I knew that didn't have management already, and I offered my services up to them. And I think a lot of the guys initially, guys like Nate, knew who I was and knew that they could trust me, and we built a great relationship. I mean, Nate was my very first client, and he's still my client today. I mean, it's been 19 years, 20 years now, 18 years, 19 years, something like that I've been managing him. And I signed him when he was in high school, and now he's a grown man with a beautiful family, and he's had one hell of a career all the way through. So it's great to have those stories like that where you're able to, find somebody, watch them grow and turn themselves into a world-class athlete and champion, and watch that success happen and see that career completely play out in front of you. So guys like Nate and a lot of others that I represent, it's been a pretty fun ride watching those things happen.
Do you think that different agents have different styles to where, I mean, there's some of the ones that people in the sport know about are obviously you, and then Steve, and then Lucas Myrtle, and do you, much like a rider and his style, does an athlete have something similar that obviously it's not going to mesh with every athlete, or do you really have to kind of, everybody checks the same boxes, you kind of have to represent yourself and your athletes the same way to be successful, or can you kind of do things your unique way that allow your athletes to have a different experience with you than they might with somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody does things a little bit differently, right? Like Steve's different from me, Lucas is different from me, Lucas is different from Steve, and so on and so forth. So I think everyone has their own style. The way I've always looked at it is, which is unique to Steve and which is unique to Lucas, is I was the athlete at the top, right? Like, I can honestly say that. Like, I was at the elite level athlete, world class, and I know that I can jump into those shoes and see it from their perspective.
Yes.
Much better than probably any other athlete agent that's out there, simply because I was there, right?
Right.
And so I looked at it, and the way I've always done my business is, what would I be comfortable accepting, and what would I be comfortable in seeing someone who's working for me, how they're going to represent me. And if it's not something that I would personally accept, being the athlete, then I wouldn't do it. And so, I run a pretty tight program as far as athletes goes. Like, I don't, whereas Lucas likes to have a lot of clients, I'm not one that wants a lot of clients, right? Because I never want to be in a position, and you find this in Supercross quite a bit. If you have a bunch of young kids that ride the 250 class, there's a pretty good pretty good likelihood at some point, because there's not many seats, that you're going to have two guys going up for the exact same seat.
Sure.
And one of them's going to get it, one of them isn't. And if you're managing both of them, you better have one hell of a good story as to why one got it and the other one didn't.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I try to make sure that I don't get myself into that situation, because if I was one of the riders and I wanted to ride with Yamaha and I didn't get it because my manager manages another guy and he's the one that got the ride, I'd be pissed off. And so for me, like, I don't want to run into that situation ever. And so I do things a little bit different. Like, Lucas likes having, like, lots of guys, right? But I like having a tight little group of motocross, tight little group in freestyle. I got my tight little group in auto racing. And I know that because of the athletes that I have, I'm never going to have a weird crossover situation come to light. And so it keeps me, I can do things very freely, and I don't have to, I don't want to have to play chess with two different guys going after the same deal.
Sure.
So
sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Everyone does things differently, and Steve's one of the guys where he just, he's involved in lots of sports, and in general, he normally just has one huge banger athlete in each sport. Obviously, he's got Kenny and Adam right now. But I don't think that there's much conflict there, because those guys are such good friends. Obviously, Kenny's going to finish his career on a Honda. Adam is just the beginning of his. So I don't think there's any conflict there. But Steve's always had just like one super mega athlete in each sport. And if he's ever had two, he's had like the mega guy at the beginning of their career and the mega guy at the end of their career. And then again, there's no conflict.
Right.
So again, everyone does their own thing. Everyone does it a little bit differently, but I would say that's just kind of the difference in the way all three of us do our jobs, and all of them can work, right? I think it just depends on how you like to operate and the kind of things you want to work yourself through. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, to each his own for sure.
So with the new athletes that are coming into the sport now, and those that are going to be coming around the bend, I mean, you got guys like, Hayden Deegan, who is a mega star now, to where people walk up to his dad and don't even really know who he is. They know his son. So you've got that is upon the horizon. But now you've got guys like, Jet Lawrence and just all these young guys coming in that have these personalities that everybody always says, man, I just want people to show more personality. And guys like Jet are definitely doing that. How big of a role does showcasing your personality, more than just in the post-race interview and the press conference, but on social media, not only for these young guys, but for guys that have elongated their careers like Nate Adams? How big of a role today does social media play in your athletes and the deals that you take to the negotiation table, as compared to really just a couple years ago, let alone when you first got into the sport? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a loaded question, right? Like, it's hugely important, and I get that. I think sometimes with some brands it's overly important, because the reality is that you shouldn't need to, as an athlete, completely allow everybody in the front door if you don't want to, right? I think you look at someone like an Eli Tomac, for example.
Right.
I don't think he likes social media at all. Like, if you look at his posts on Instagram, he is doing basically what he's contracted to do. Right? I mean, it's rare that you see anything that opens up any pathways into what his real life looks like.
Sure.
So I think he's a pretty private guy, right? He lives in the middle of nowhere, up in Colorado, which is great. And he doesn't let people into like what his real personal life is. And then you have the exact opposite, the polar opposite of that is Roxon, right? Who shows you everything and possibly too much sometimes, but that's just the way Kenny is.
And is that being done because Kenny enjoys putting that stuff out, or is that a contract thing where he has to? Okay.
No. Kenny was doing it way before there were line items in a contract about what you had to do social media wise.
Sure.
It's just something that he gravitated to. He enjoyed taking people along with those experiences of his. And some people, want to do it. Some people don't. I disagree with the companies that make it such a huge part of the deliverable list. Because in the end, yes, these guys are entertainers, so on and so forth. But the reality of it all is if you're not performing, like really performing, then it doesn't really matter what you do on social media from a racing standpoint, right?
Right.
Now, when you start looking at some other, like some other sports that are maybe more of a judged competition sports, then I think that the social media thing has more relevance, right? Like a freestyle rider or something like that, where it's a judge. So like the performance is about the show you're putting on. So for that, and it's not a racing deal, I think that's in the social media, requirements that are put on an athlete. I think those are they're more well-intentioned. Whereas the racing guys, I think for a racing guy, because there's so much that goes into being, like a premier race guy. And if you want to get 5th, 6th, or 7th places, like whatever. But if you want to win, contend for championships, be on the podium every week, I mean, your regimen has to be pretty rock solid. And some of the requirements that are getting put on the guys right now are getting so heavy that they're actually having to go hire people to do it for them.
Yeah, and I don't agree with that, just because it's then it loses really what the intention truly is. Like I want to see. I want to see the real side of this athlete, not necessarily what his social media guy is posting and
producing.
And I think it's different if there's somebody like, Alex Martin has started to do his troll train vlogs, and yes, he's got a guy that videos him, but that's a little bit different than what I'm talking about. It's still genuine. It's still, you're seeing Alex. He just has a guy that's following him around with a camera, as opposed to a social media manager that's posting for him. And I agree with you.
Didn't you have a guy like Jason Anderson who's found like another niche in this whole thing, with the Team Fried deal,
right?
With the Team Fried deal, and that works really, really well, and that's turning into a business. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. How big of an impact is this going to have on the athletes that aren't professional yet, that might be 10, 15 years from it, that might be 2 years from getting their first big pro deal, that they need to understand how you represent yourself on social media? How big of a role does that have today, as opposed to, I'm sitting here looking at a Bob Hanna and a Ricky Carmichael helmet, as opposed to when those guys were at their peak and when you were doing your thing? Is it something that you're like, look, you've got to do something? Because what comes to mind for me is Blake Baggett. He's fast. He's a rock star. He does his wife does twice as much as him on social media, and that's fine. That's his thing. I don't know that that's going to work in a 2025 environment like it does in a 2015 to 2020. What's your thought on that?
So here's what I think on that is the kids that are coming out now, the Jet Lawrences, right? He's 16 years old. He only knows social media.
Yeah.
Right? Vegan, whoever it is, all these kids that are coming up, it's already part of what they do every day anyway. So for them, it's already integrated into how they operate their life. Mm-hmm. Right? Whereas the guys that are a bit older, again, I go into the Tomac situation, even though Tomac's in his 20s, you didn't have to do those things when he was riding for Fast Connection on 250. So it's thrust into his normal program, and sometimes it can upset the apple cart a little bit. Whereas the new kids coming up, it's just going to be part of what they're doing every single day, because it's how they operate, it's how they communicate with their friends. It's how they do everything. I mean, it's like, if you actually kind of think back to when text messaging became really big, right? Because for a long time, the only people that text message were people in Europe. and then it kind of came to America and it became this phenomenon where no one wanted to answer the phone. Everyone just wanted to do text messaging. So obviously, as time, as we kind of move through a timeline here, I mean, it's going to become easier for these guys because it's not going to be an invasion on what they're already doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we've got Jimmy Button on the line with us today, and he, as always, he's a busy guy and has a hard stop. I'd love to take a deeper dive with you into just some other components of, what goes into getting the best deal for an athlete and making sure that the brands that they represent are taken care of, and just kind of continue this conversation. If you'd be willing to do a part 2 in the coming weeks, I'm sure everybody would definitely enjoy to continue that conversation. So we can try to set that up, and man, I really appreciate you jumping on and just kind of giving us an introduction at least to what your opinion is on the different styles that agents can have and the different styles that an athlete can have when representing a brand on and off the track. Yeah,
no problem. I would love to. It's what I do every day, so yeah, it'd be fun to do that, and just kind of dovetailing off into the athletes and whatnot. I mean, it is different these days. What you need to do and how you do need to brand yourself and create content. The caveat to all of this is the fact that it has, in many respects, it has lengthened a lot of people's timeline of how long they can earn money. Obviously before, you're 30 years old or whatever, and you're pretty much done with racing or riding or whatnot. And through social media, the good thing about it is that a lot of guys have really been able to extend that earning, that earning window, by creating good content. Nate's a great example of that. I mean,
absolutely.
Nate creates content every day. Yeah. We have a lot of deals for Nate right now that, with him not being, a regular FMX competitor anymore, we have a lot of deals that are strictly based on what he's doing from a brand advertising perspective.
Yeah.
And so, as guys mature, as they learn, the good side of social, is that it can extend your timeline of making money, which is great, because in the end, I mean, everybody involved in these sports, they do it because they love it, and some of these guys, they end up being very very lucky in the fact that they can make a great living doing what it is that they love, and now the fact that you're able to extend that window, maybe by 5 or 10 years, who knows? That's a great situation that they can continue to take care of their families and themselves, by being able to share those experiences that they have on a dirt bike. So I think it's great.
Absolutely. And again, man, I appreciate you jumping on, and we definitely will do a part 2, and I look forward to it. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Moto Marketing Podcast. If your goal is to get real, measurable results from your marketing that will grow your company revenue, then check out how Impakt Media can get the same results that they have for Moto's most iconic brands by visiting thinkimpakt.com. That's THINKIMPAKT.com. Have a marketing question that you want answered on the show? Send your questions to questions@motomarketingpodcast.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast.